Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Bant Breen. Bant, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here.
It is great to have you. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm the founder and chairman of a company called Qnary. Qnary is one of the leading companies in optimizing and growing the online presence of executives. We've built a technology that has been working with executives over the last 10 years to optimize and build out their presence in search and social media, and it generates thought leadership content for them. And so it's been quite a journey from from inception to where we are today. We're based in New York City, but we also have offices in Europe, in both Spain and in London. We also have a team in Sydney, Australia. So it's been quite a ride.
Sounds like one. So, how does the company come about? What's the story there?
Yeah, so I spent most of my career working in, I'd say, digital marketing and advertising, at some of the larger kind of marketing advertising houses in the UK. I started my career at WPP and went on to work at Publicis and ultimately at the IPG or Interpublic Group. And when I was at IPG, I became quite aware that there just wasn't a very powerful solution that was supporting individuals or executives with their online presence. There were a ton of tools focused around brands, but really nothing for executives. And so spent the time to map out what that would look like, what an executive actually would want to do, and ended up leaving and raising a little bit of capital and scrambling around, and for a couple of years really tried to tell people that their online presence was important, which I think was very hard in the early years. Most people, I think, took my meetings because they knew me from the brand world, and they said, "Oh, well, we trusted you with our brand, so this must be interesting." And they always wanted us to manage their brands, and we kept on saying, no, that's not what we do. That's not what we do. But finally, I think the world caught up with the idea, and about 5 years in, the company really started to grow quickly. And so we're really pleased. We've been one of the fastest on the Inc. 5000 list now for the last 3 years, and we hope to be on that list again this year.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you touched upon and that I wanted to ask you about was actually the Fox News interview.
We have Bant Breen here from Qnary. You're the CEO of this company, Qnary.
Yes.
And you manage online identities. So you're an interesting guy for this topic.
I had a look at it's on your site, obviously, and I had a
Yeah.
look at the actual YouTube link, and it was 2013.
Yeah,
So it does
long
go
time
back
ago.
away, especially in the tech world. What do you make of that now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the time, the core premise that we had, which was that your online presence matters, and it matters it matters for a variety of reasons. It matters in terms of your reputation. It also matters in terms of the opportunities that you receive. I think that premise, that thesis for the business, is more true today than ever. And so I would say that it took a while for people to really comprehend how important the online world was to them. But certainly, when you have events like this pandemic that we're living through, that even highlights the importance of your online presence more than ever. And so it was fun. That's a fun interview. I remember it, and being quite chuffed that we were able to get on that channel. But it helped, I think, raise awareness to the area, and really, I think, almost kind of create a new sector over the last 10 years.
Well, actually, I did want to ask you about, and I interpreted what you do as for brands, funnily enough, because it's reputation management.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of reputation management for a company, and then branding solutions, which again, branding, but for a company. But would you say there's a new kind of buzzword which is out there, which is personal branding. Would you say that's what you do?
I think it's an aspect of what we do. I would say that the relationship between an enterprise brand and an executive has changed over the last 15, 20 years, really. Whereas I think if you were to go back 20 years ago, most executives and companies would hide behind the corporate brand. I don't want to say that they were hide behind it, but they would be comfortable to always lead with the brand, and really, your success as an executive was almost dependent on the company that you were a part of, right? But the porous nature that has happened over the last a couple of decades, where executives have a much more visible role and there's a greater demand for transparency, has shifted that dynamic. And so if you're an executive that doesn't have an online presence, that's actually a problem for your business. And so I would say that we're about kind of that dynamic, which is the importance to create more transparency, more open dialogue, and to realize that the executives are dimensions of the story of the business, and their roles dimensionalize that brand. So there is an element of personal branding, absolutely, but we're certainly not just about kind of like we're not really about kind of like personal branding in terms of like your TikTok page or those types of things.
You're not representing influencers then.
Correct. Yeah, we're not a celebrity shop. I mean, the folks that we work with really are executives. And I would say we work with about 50% of our clients are executives of small to medium-sized businesses, and about 50% are Fortune 500 businesses.
So have you got any examples that you particularly are proud of or that spring to mind?
We don't really talk a lot about the examples. It's just a part of the relationship that we have with our clients, albeit I can speak in generalities and the kind of the differences that we have with different types of clients. When we're working with some larger organizations, we tend to work with this would be, let's say, like a Fortune 50 company. Many of those companies now have what they call our brand ambassadors, people that represent the company in different conversations, not just the C-suite. And so we'll work with them to build out that presence and help them enter dialogues across a wide variety of areas that's relevant to their business. In terms of some of the other stuff, we've had tremendous case studies where we work with what we kind of call accelerated growth companies, where we'll work with them pre-raise all the way through the raise, and then sometimes all the way to the exit. And we've had some exciting stories on with those types of companies, as you really see how the role of the executive as a champion of those types of companies is even more important, obviously, at that stage. But we now work I think across over 50 different business verticals, and we have thousands of enterprise clients. But the nature of our work is that we don't really, I don't really speak about our specific clients.
Is it the first rule of Fight Club?
A little bit. We talk. We have very, very good relationships, and one of the things I think that's interesting about our business is that you do see and you learn about the perspectives of a lot of executives, and so we take those relationships quite seriously.
What are some of the misconceptions around reputation management?
I think that when I started the business, the reputation management space was very much associated with a previous, I'd say a perspective on Google and how you could kind of manipulate Google search listings in various ways. That would be kind of like the kind of the reputation.com type companies. And there was a sense that back in the late, like let's say 2008, 2007, that time frame, you could those companies would create millions of affiliate links that would essentially try to drive traffic in various ways to help results, and sometimes really do nefarious things, I think, kind of maybe make stories look better than they were or make people look better than they are. What I would say is that world has really disappeared in many respects, because Google has changed their algorithm so dramatically that that kind of activity is punished quite dramatically. That being said, you do have crisis management firms that still play in this space. And so sometimes I think reputation gets associated with that kind of crisis management area. We're much more focused on kind of an evergreen management and really kind of telling that story going forward. And another kind of, you asked about kind of like the rules of Fight Club. One of the rules of Qnary is we don't make bad people look good. We make good people look spectacular. So it's
like that.
try to avoid that world.
Good. Well, in terms of branding for an individual or an executive, let's say you have someone who you pass on the street, and let's say you know them, you're fond of them, and they're interested in, let's say, doing better, and you got a few moments to just sort of encourage them with some advice. What do you tell them?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would talk to them about is first ask them that they should ask themselves what they really want to be known for and associated with. One of the challenges for all of us as human beings, and certainly I think this is almost enhanced when people get to kind of the executive ranks, is that they want to talk about every topic and be an expert in everything. But the reality is that if you really want to kind of cut through or break through in any form or fashion, you really need to find out what you want to focus on. And it doesn't mean that you need to focus on that topic forever. You can definitely evolve and change that topic over the years, but don't try to be kind of talking about kind of politics on one day, a sport event another day, marketing on the next day. Try to really kind of tell your story in a more cohesive manner. The second thing then I would also talk to them about is try to kind of own their presence as much as possible. If they can go out and make sure that they've registered, they have a LinkedIn presence, a Twitter presence, About.me, Crunchbase, AngelList, all those types of things. I think that would be the next thing. And then start to kind of get a little bit comfortable about maybe with one of those channels, maybe like a LinkedIn, and start to think about kind of how you can utilize that. We obviously then would work to enhance and work with them on making that, take it to the next level. But those would be probably the first couple of things I would ask them to do.
I got the inclination maybe that you are a fan of LinkedIn. Would you say that's accurate?
I think that it's been interesting to see how the company has evolved, and I think that one of the kind of challenges that LinkedIn has is that at the end of the day, at the core of its business is that it's about recruitment. Still, that's actually the bulk of their revenue is still recruitment related. However, it's become so much more in people's lives. We've seen the evolution of LinkedIn over the last decade, which has paralleled kind of the growth and importance of what we do as well, which is, 10 years ago, the number one place that an executive would look another executive up was in Google search listings. Now it's LinkedIn. And that is, it's obviously Google's still like a close number two, but the reality is that, LinkedIn was a site back then, whereas, with its mobile site, it really has become with the mobile app, it's become almost a de facto place that people look one another up in I would say Europe and in the U.S. In other markets, there are other platforms that are equally important. I think that the question will be really how the company evolves from here. It has all of those all those channels are trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up.
So it's like, are we an Instagram? Are we a Snapchat? Or
yeah, there's a big monument in Rome that celebrates, I think, the unification of the country. And if you look at it, it's kind of the Vittorio Emanuele statue, and it's a very ornate structure with lots and lots of design on it. Very kind of, I don't know, 19th century type of overly ornate type of stuff. And I think that websites and platforms run that risk as well, where they keep on adding little features here and adding more and more and more, and then you forget kind of what they actually really do. And so that's probably, I think all of the platforms have that risk, right? So, and you have to then ask what the core is and where the core will be. So we'll see what happens. It's a very important platform for us. We really love it, but equally important are several others. We love Medium. We love. We're probably a chorus of one to say that we love Twitter. We see how Twitter is really quite important still in terms of tracking information, and how Twitter tends to still be the most powerful tool in terms of how companies monitor topics and activities. Most of the newsrooms in the country, most of the banks still track so many trends just with Twitter data. So.
Well, another kind of space they're trying to get into, I would say, is audio. And you've got your own podcast, if I'm not mistaken. How have you found that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that we're probably not so aggressive in the podcasting space so much. I was very early involved in, I'd say, some of the stuff that we saw in the audio push during the pandemic with some of the new sites, et cetera. And I think that the opportunity is that it's another passive form of media that has not been fully exploited, probably, I would say. And so that's why I think investors are so excited about. Probably the standout example, obviously, is Clubhouse. But the challenge with that has been, the numbers slowed a lot after pandemic has kind of cleaned up. So as the pandemic has slowed down, the numbers for some of those services have dropped. I think podcasts are extremely cool, and I think they're super valuable to tell stories, and I do think audio is a very, very powerful channel. I like podcasts more than I like Clubhouse. And I know Clubhouse is like the sexy new thing, but it's just a mess. It's just a mess, and it's just not. I don't know if it's great for brands right now, executive brands. It's too messy. So we'll see how they develop the next round. But it seemed like Thomas, you may be aware of this. Back in the day, there were tons and tons of events that would have these kind of panels where they would have not one, two, but they'd end up having like 8 or 10 people on a panel discussion at like a conference. And that's kind of what I feel like Clubhouse is. It's like bad panel sessions, So.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think they'll probably be marginalized at some point, but
yeah, I mean, I feel like we're still in the early days of video, to be perfectly honest. I think the one breakout really over the last 2 years has been TikTok. I think the fact that they just extended to the length of their video to, I think it's 3 minutes now, is amazing. It's an incredibly sticky platform. Uh, it's really kind of changing the game for everybody. So we'll see how that continues to evolve.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because in terms of executives or professionals, I would think probably it's the last place that they would be. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think this is a little bit of a generational one. It's probably not for like senior executives, but what it's clearly becoming is an all-in-one platform for kind of Gen Z, where they just kind of highlighted, I think, this week where TikTok is actually being utilized by a lot of Gen Zers to find jobs, so job recruitment. So they're actually becoming a competitor of LinkedIn for that younger generation. Also, if you look at topics, if you look at some of the hashtags like finance or exchange traded funds or investing, you're going to be blown away. I mean, some of these business topics or business verticals, there's just a ton of content on TikTok now. I mean, billions and billions of videos. So it's just quite incredible how that's expanded. So now, back to your core question, do I think that's a need for a senior executive? No, not yet. But it's certainly important to track this, and these are the trends that are going to shape what people utilize tomorrow. And so, things are definitely going to be much more video based. There's no doubt about it, and that's one of the reasons we have pushed aggressively into the video space this year. In fact, it sounds funny, but YouTube moved from being kind of a non-important executive channel to being, I think, the third most important channel in our study last year of the most important channels for executives, because there's a little bit of a voyeuristic quality. People like to look one another up and they want to see what they're doing. So we actually generate videos now for all of our clients.
That's cool. And
yeah.
It's like you say, with TikTok anyway, it's potentially where people will be, not necessarily where they are now. So
yeah,
interesting
absolutely.
trend. When I was looking over your profile or the messages before we had our conversation, the credentials that you have are pretty cool. Like I speak to a lot of people, so I see a lot of similar types of credentials. Did you want to talk a little bit about your PhD? Because that sounds interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. The year before, I guess it would have been 2019. I spent that year it was the last year of writing my PhD. In March of 2020, in the beginning of March of 2020, I defended my PhD and was awarded my PhD. And the following day, I went into lockdown. Now, anybody that knows the process of going through a PhD, it's almost like personal lockdown because you're working so hard to write the thesis, etc. So it was almost like the day after I finished the PhD, and I was ready to just like go on vacation. I was presented with a face mask and told to stay indoors for another year. But the PhD itself was an incredible experience. I looked at the topic of machine learning and really the fundamental question of creativity and how creative can the current state of AI be. And I chose to focus on the advertising industry, one, because it's an industry that I know extremely well. It's also an industry that has always been perceived as being associated with creativity or professional creativity, right? And so I wanted to get a sense of where the industry was in terms of their their thoughts on AI versus the reality of what was actually happening, and where things were aligned, where they were diametrically opposed. And so, I think what we're finding, and certainly I imagine people over the next couple of months will even feel this more, is the advancements in machine learning, even over the last 18 months, have been mind-boggling, really incredible. We're still seeing a lot of technology that was actually developed, decades ago, really, be commercialized and rolled out. But we're seeing companies really embrace it now. And so the pandemic actually, I think, is going to play an accelerant role for machine learning. And we're going to see it impact pretty much every area. I had a lot of fun looking at how people had trained algorithms to essentially paint paintings in the style of various artists, create songs in the form of various artists. I've seen how it can be utilized in very pedantic ways to understand the consumers that you're talking to from a call center, and looked at also kind of how it plays roles in generation of text and things like that, and looked at some of the ethical challenges. I'd say the challenge, though, in general for creative folks is that they're not very aware of what's going on in the machine learning space. They're certainly not involved in it. And so they tend to have kind of like a, I would say, either a exuberant excitement about it or an irrational fear of it. So, which is based on just lack of education on it, really, which is, so you'll talk to the people who are like, oh my God, it's the shiny new object, it's the coolest thing ever. Or you'll have the other ones where like, oh, well, the machines are going to take over my job tomorrow morning. And so, trying to work with those types of individuals and get to them to a place where they can actually see how it will impact their business is going to be the critical thing for the next couple of years. There's no agency that is really kind of figuring out the operational structures around this technology and how it will impact jobs, which it will have a tremendous impact on roles and responsibilities and how young people actually will learn and what they do. In a traditional advertising role, you'd start doing kind of the crap work, and you learn by doing the crap work over years and years, and you move up. But in a world where machine learning is actually a huge part of it, you rethink about how that work is done, how you learn and how do you utilize it. So it will change everything.
Does that cover some of the ethical concerns that you mentioned?
Yeah, I'd say that ethics is really quite in the research. It came back that everyone worries about the ethical problems and the concerns, and they're worried about topics like racial prejudice in machine learning development. They're worried about it being utilized to spread propaganda, fake news, those types of elements. But as much as they're worried about it, there was almost no real action behind those words. So it's almost like if I tell you, right, like, are you worried about global warming? And you're like, oh yeah. And then I see you walk out of your house and get into a Hummer, or a giant car. And, it wasn't leading to a lot of action. That being said, the companies that are acting are the ones that are real leaders in the space. So you look at the companies that sometimes get maligned, I think, the Amazons, Microsofts, et cetera. They're doing just a ton. They really understand the ethical issues, and they're trying to really put in best practices. OpenAI has excellent best practices, so if it's done correctly, it's an incredible support function and will allow us to do tremendous things. I don't think that there's so many kind of easy examples to point at where things have gone wrong. And certainly there will always be that risk. But the benefits actually outweigh that in the immediate term.
Interesting. So coming back to your story just for a moment, at what point, because you mentioned that you've got multiple offices and things are going great, and when I mentioned your credentials, the company's got some impressive, Entrepreneur magazine, that sort of thing. What was the progress like?
Progress in what?
From when you started the company to growth and scaling?
Yeah. I think that the big thing was for the first couple of years, we really tried to make sure that our platform actually worked, and that we really understood that proposition that people wanted. About 4 years in, we rolled out the mobile app, and the mobile app for us really simplified it for our clients into managing how they go about optimizing and overseeing their own presence. That changed the game for us. Since then, the platform continues to get better, and so I think that those shifts really kind of allowed us to scale. Also, another thing that really kind of changed, I would say, is we were the company that just had a hard time saying no. For the first 5 years, it would just be like, if you said, "Well, hey, can you build cruise liners?" Sure, we can build cruise liners. And that we spent the last 5 years really kind of focusing the business specifically around the core technology and the core solution. And that's making sure that we honed that down has allowed us to scale.
And are you using AI in your apps?
Yes.
And what's that been like?
It's been quite an amazing process. I'd say that was really kind of one of the benefits of doing the PhD. Obviously got to explore and play around with a lot of the best technologies. I think, what has it been like? It has made me, I'd say, very, very aware of what can actually be done versus what the media makes you think is happening. It also really enhanced that point of how does it impact the operations. So, one of the first things that happens a lot of times is that you'll build like a new element of the technology, and you really just need to make sure that you are organizationally planning alongside those breakthroughs that you make on the AI side.
Okay. And in terms of where you want to take the company and what your goals are, have you got any thoughts there?
Yeah, right now, we'll see how things continue to progress, but we're excited about how the business is evolving. Some of the new services, as I mentioned, at the beginning of 2020, we really kind of were pushing heavily into two areas. Machine learning now really infuses almost every aspect of what we deliver. It also has been a big push for video in what we do. And so I think those two areas will continue to develop going forward. And the other thing really is that we tend to, for these SMBs and even for the larger companies, we tend to work with the very kind of the top of companies, like the top, I'd say, quartile of a company. And we are now finding ourselves actually manage more and more executives inside of a business. So looking at how our platform ends up kind of managing not just like hundreds, but thousands of executives in one company is really kind of where we're focused on right now.
Sounds cool. Is there any
Yeah.
that you can? Is there like a demo or something, or a YouTube presence that you have to look at the platform?
I mean, you can definitely go to qnary.com and, if you want, there's a form there, fill that out. It'll kind of sign you up for a session with one of our analysts, and they'll take you through everything. It's a really, actually great experience.
Good. Is there anything which you think would be of value to the audience that I haven't asked you about today?
Probably. I'm sure there's probably millions of things that would be valuable to them. But, in the context of what we do, I think this has been a great conversation, and I really enjoyed being on your show.
Okay, Ben. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, so probably the best place to learn about the company is to go to www.q as in Queen, N as in Nancy, A as in Apple, R as in Rabbit, Y as in Yellow.com. Qnary, we pronounce it like canary, but it's with a Q, so Qnary.com. If you want to find me, you can go to my website, bantbreen.com, or you can look me up on any channel, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever, and I try to make myself really available to folks. So definitely shoot me a note.
At very least, to check out the Fox News interview, right?
Well, you can avoid that one. That's when I was young and probably about 40 pounds lighter.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the value today.
Cheers. Thanks so much for being on the show.